It's taking a fresh look at everything the company's doing, figuring out, in light of sort of the societal changes that we're seeing, including from the new administration, what do we need to change? What does the company still feel good about? What issues that we might have focused on in the past do we need to bring back to our board of directors? Think about those things again and whether those are still sort of core components to like who the company is, or do we need to, sort of make adjustments?
Joining me today is Jason Goode, partner with Alston Bird. Jason, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, it's great to see you again. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, I wanted to start by looking at the SEC, and it's obviously under new leadership when Paul Atkins is confirmed as the chair. Do you expect much change in the focus of SEC regulation and enforcement?
I think that we're going to see a lot of change, and we've already started to see that, even though, as you mentioned, Paul Atkins hasn't been confirmed yet, which maybe that will happen this week. We'll see. But he's certainly behind a lot of the other, senior members of the new administration. But it's going to be huge on a couple of fronts. On the enforcement side, we're already starting to see a couple of things there. First, they're changing the personnel. They're eliminating a lot of enforcement personnel. And they're also changing the way in which enforcement actions can be brought. It used to be there was a delegation of authority to the director of enforcement. That's been eliminated, so that there are now more things that need to go in front of all of the SEC commissioners. So we're not really sure yet like what that will mean in terms of like how enforcement is like sort of implemented by the staff, but just their internal processes, we're already seeing changes. And then I think on the regulatory front, we're expecting a lot. We've seen a little bit already, sort of before Atkins is the new chair. So I think that everybody is expecting, some significant changes once he's in, but, you got to keep reading the newspapers every day because we'll just see what happens.
And what advice are you giving to your clients about adapting to these likely changes?
I think the biggest thing that we would say is that this is not a year where it's sort of business as usual, right? It's not a year to take last year's proxy statement or, quarterly or annual reports and just sort of make a new version and make some edits and roll on, right? It's taking a fresh look at everything the company's doing, figuring out, in light of sort of the societal changes that we're seeing, including from the new administration, what do we need to change? What does the company still feel good about? What issues that we might have focused on in the past do we need to bring back to our board of directors? Think about those things again and whether those are still sort of core components to like who the company is, or do we need to, sort of make adjustments? And I would also say that there's a lot of sort of governance documents sort of behind the scenes for like how a public company runs that always a good idea on a periodic basis to go read through those, make sure that there's nothing in there that the board needs to refresh.
And lastly, what advice are you giving to your clients regarding oversight of cybersecurity and AI risk? And how should REIT general counsels go about educating their boards on these matters?
I would say, first of all, like take a step back that like for a while, one of the big risks that was dealt with, usually by the audit committee, but sometimes by the full board, was like climate risk, right? That is as sort of the most significant risk to the company, I think has been sort of supplanted by cyber and AI. So what used to be in sort of an infrequent update to the board of directors on cybersecurity policies, attacks, how the company is actively trying to protect against those attacks, that is becoming like pretty much a standing board item. So it's being addressed by the company on a quarterly basis. So the advice that we give is that, or that I like to give, not to speak for my whole firm, is that having those individuals in the boardroom is helpful. Like the person who is leading cybersecurity should be reporting and communicating directly with either the board or your audit committee. Why is that? Well, partly it is to allow the board to hear directly from those people who have the experience at the firm, at the company. And then also it's to build those relationships so that, if an unforeseen cyber attack happens and there's a group that has to get together to decide what's happening, what are our disclosure obligations, what do we need to do, who do we need to hire, that you're having those communications with people that you're not meeting for the first time, right? That you've been seeing them at the board meetings, you've gotten to know them as people so that the working relationship is already there if in the future something happens you need to address. So it's becoming more important. saying that cyber is becoming more important is not a new groundbreaking statement, but it's taking a lot more time for a public company board than it used to because, it's an important risk that they're spending time on.